In this video, we explore a forgotten medieval conflict that dragged on for nearly 300 years. From 1296 to 1603, England and Scotland fought through invasions, raids, and endless sieges. Unlike other famous wars, this one had no single ending, but it shaped generations and left deep scars on both nations. Number 1. The First Sparks. In 1296, Edward I of England pushed north into Scotland, weakened by a succession crisis and fragmented loyalties, and the decision set off a chain of violence that would ripple for centuries. Berwick-upon-Tweed fell first. Town walls were broken, trade halted, and the message was clear. English authority would be enforced at the border and beyond. The removal of the Stone of Destiny from Scone Abbey to Westminster carried heavy symbolism, turning a sacred emblem of Scottish kingship into a trophy of conquest. Resistance formed quickly, but not as parade ground battles at first. It grew from ambushes on river crossings, night strikes on supply trains, and sudden raids against garrisons. William Wallace became the sharp edge of that approach, using speed, local knowledge, and timing to offset shortages of armor and horses. At Stirling Bridge in 1297, terrain did more than numbers. A narrow crossing, marshy ground, and disciplined coordination allowed a smaller Scottish force to hit an advancing column in pieces, breaking it before the full army could deploy. Success, though, brought retaliation. At Falkirk in 1298, English longbowmen shattered dense Scottish spearmen formations, and the pendulum swung back. Wallace's capture and execution in 1305 was meant to end the revolt by example, but it left a vacuum that Robert Bruce filled the next year. Crowned in 1306, Bruce faced immediate hardship, defeats in the open, pressure from strongholds loyal to England, and the constant problem of feeding and paying fighters who were more tenants than professionals. He adjusted by leaning on small, mobile groups, avoiding set-piece clashes unless ground and momentum were on his side. Castle by castle, often by siege or stealth rather than storming walls straight on, he chipped away at garrisons and cut the lines that held them. The culmination came in 1314 at Bannockburn. English heavy cavalry, powerful on firm ground, met soft, broken terrain and prepared Scottish formations. Chiltern's tight ranks of spearmen held their shape, while English riders lost cohesion in the marshy approaches and the press of men. The defeat forced a reassessment in London and widened diplomatic space for Edinburgh. Within Scotland, Bruce consolidated authority, balancing rewards to allies with pressure on waverers, and the conflict shifted toward negotiation. The Treaty of Edinburgh-Northampton in 1328 acknowledged Scottish independence and the legitimacy of Bruce's line. Yet nothing about the political geography had changed enough to guarantee quiet. The frontier still cut across kinship networks and trade routes. Fortified places still dotted the marches, and both crowns retained memories of gains and losses. The pattern of invasion and reprisal had been set, and the first hard lesson was learned. Neither side could impose a quick, final solution when terrain, resources, and society all favored a slow, grinding war. Number 2. The Second War and the Knightly Age. The uneasy peace achieved in 1328 quickly collapsed, and by 1332, conflict returned with full force. Edward Balliol, son of the former Scottish King John Balliol, landed in Scotland with the backing of Edward III of England, and a coalition of disinherited nobles eager to reclaim lost lands. This invasion opened the Second War of Scottish Independence, a campaign that exposed the realities of medieval warfare in its most familiar form. Knights in full armor leading charges, cavalry crashing together in open fields, and longbowmen breaking formations from a distance. The decisive elements of the battlefield often came down to timing and terrain. At Duplin Moor, in 1332, English and Balliol forces demonstrated the lethal potential of coordinated longbow volleys, tearing apart densely packed Scottish schiltrons before armoured infantry moved in. This battle revealed a pattern repeated in later encounters, where heavy cavalry could not dominate without support from ranged troops. The Scottish side was far from passive. Resistance was fueled not only by local loyalties, but also by the old alliance with France, which ensured that England fought on two fronts and could not fully concentrate on subduing its northern neighbour. Scottish commanders adapted by using smaller, flexible units, striking supply lines, and exploiting knowledge of local landscapes to offset English resources. Warfare here was not a single, sweeping campaign, but a grinding contest of endurance, where castles became pivots of control, and sieges often mattered more than open battles. Garrison duty was brutal. Soldiers endured disease, hunger, and constant threat of sudden assault, and fortified strongholds frequently changed hands multiple times within a decade. For the ordinary soldier, life in this war was far from the romantic image of knights in shining armor. True knights did spend years training in horsemanship, swordsmanship, and the use of heavy armor, but they formed only a fraction of the armies. Most fighters were peasants summoned by feudal obligation, arriving with little more than spears, axes, or farm tools reforged for combat. They marched long distances with scant provisions, camped in harsh weather, and often scavenged from the land to survive. Nights were cold, disease spread easily in encampments, and many campaigns ended with soldiers more exhausted than victorious. Even knights themselves faced constant challenges. Armor was heavy, battles rarely glamorous, and wounds often turned fatal due to infection. The war dragged on through alternating victories and setbacks. Balliol briefly took the throne, but struggled to secure lasting support, while the Scottish crown, though weakened, held on through resilience and alliances. By the Treaty of Berwick in 1357, after years of battles, raids, and sieges, Scotland's independence was reaffirmed. Yet the cost was immense. The Scottish king, David II, had been captured at the Battle of Neville's Cross in 1346 and released only after an enormous ransom was agreed, burdening the realm for decades. The treaty ended this phase formally, but in practice, the frontier remained unstable. Cross-border raids continued, and fortified towers along the marches remained garrisons of tension. The Second War revealed the enduring patterns of medieval conflict. Knightly warfare, tempered by the rise of infantry and archery, the dominance of fortified strongholds, and the grim reality that for most participants, the war was less about honor and more about survival. It also cemented the understanding that England and Scotland were locked in a cycle of rivalry, that treaties could pause but never truly end. Number 3. Border Wars and Everyday Survival. For nearly 2 centuries after the Second War of Independence, the Anglo-Scottish borderlands became